Despite the snow worship cult's prior preparations, evacuating believers to high-rise buildings and the subway, the zombies and giant rats, drawn by the scent of the living, managed to infiltrate their sanctuaries. A few rats broke through, sowing chaos among the snow worshippers. Without skilled combatants to defend them, even a small number of zombies could devastate an entire floor of believers. Terrified screams echoed as they rushed to the windows, pleading for rescue from the armed forces outside. However, Xiao Honglian and the others were deaf to their cries for help. They were already stretched to their limits, barely managing to protect themselves. Even leaders like Xing Yixian could only offer a somber prayer, return to the kingdom of God, before refocusing on the fight at hand. Diverting resources to deal with scattered zombies at the rear would compromise the entire defensive line. Zhang Yi noticed a dozen zombies breaching their defenses and hesitated momentarily before taking them out with precise shots. Although he cared little for the fate of the snow worshippers, he couldn't afford to let disturbances at the rear affect frontline operations. Panic among the believers could ripple forward, disrupting the fighters' concentration and coordination. Yet the breaches multiplied as the battle devolved into hand-to-hand combat. "It's been 40 minutes, what's the status over there?" Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian voiced their growing anxiety. They had been tasked with holding the line for half an hour, but the onslaught showed no signs of abating. "The tunnels are full of corpses. Just 10 more minutes, and we'll finish them." Bian Jun's cold assurance offered little comfort, yet they had no choice but to trust in his words. As the battle line contracted, the areas housing ordinary believers were abandoned. This tactical decision had an unintended benefit. The zombies, drawn to the scent of the living, converged on these locations, reducing the pressure on the combat troops. In reality, these believers had been used as bait in Bian Jun's strategy from the outset. Everything was expendable for the mission's success. The screams of the snow worship cult echoed through the chaos as unprotected believers fell victim to the merciless tide of undead and rodents. They became easy prey for the ravenous horde. Just as Zhang Yi allowed himself a brief sigh of relief, believing they could hold out a while longer. Meanwhile, Huahua, his cat companion, suddenly tensed. Her ears twitched, and she bared her sharp fangs, sensing an imminent threat. Zhang Yi tightened his grip on his sniper rifle, scanning the horizon with hawk-like focus. His eyes were keen, capturing every movement, ensuring no enemy could escape his vigilant watch. Yet, despite his sharp awareness, there was one direction he hadn't considered. Suddenly, Huahua let out a sharp meow, and rapidly transformed her body, enlarging to shield Zhang Yi. Startled by her unexpected reaction, Zhang Yi's surprise quickly turned to realization: an enemy was closing in. A gust of wind swept past as Huahua leaped fiercely into the air. Zhang Yi's eyes followed her ascent, widening as he saw a swarm of winged humanoid creatures emerging from the darkness. Their enormous bat-like wings contrasted with their slender bodies, revealing them to be bronze-armored corpses of a new terrifying species. "Another new type, huh? They've been hiding well," Zhang Yi muttered, narrowing his gaze on the airborne threat. Meanwhile, Huahua had already captured one of the creatures, dragging it down to the rooftop with lethal precision. The remaining creatures shifted their focus to Zhang Yi, preparing to attack. With calm determination, Zhang Yi opened a massive dimensional door and aimed his rifle. Two of the creatures, caught off guard by his tactic, stumbled through the portal, while another fell to his swift shot. The rest, realizing their vulnerability, began to circle high above, searching for an opportunity to strike back. These flying corpses, having witnessed the massacre of their kind on the ground, recognized Zhang Yi as a formidable adversary. However, his bodyguards were prepared, thwarting any surprise attacks. The rooftop echoed with the clash between Huahua and the bronze-armored corpse, its roars drowned out by Huahua's ferocious snarls. She cried, shredding her opponent with claws like steel until it was reduced to pieces. As the remaining dozen flying corpses observed their fallen comrade, a flicker of fear crossed their eyes. Zhang Yi noted their speed, making them difficult to target. But he had an ace up his sleeve, his divine power Kamui, lethal at this range, and the extensive defensive reach of his dimensional doors provided him with an escape route if necessary. He felt no fear. Zhang Yi steadied himself, ready to face the airborne threat head-on. He knew the battle was far from over, but with unwavering resolve and the support of his companions, he was determined to stand his ground until the very end. The clash between the living and the undead raged on, a testament to the resilience and courage of those who dared to defy the darkness. As the remaining dozen flying corpses observed their fallen comrade, a flicker of fear crossed their eyes, a rare emotion for such mindless beings. For a moment, the battlefield seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting to see what the corpses would do next. Then, as if a single, malevolent will drove them, the flying corpses, wary and hesitant, abruptly changed course. Their hollow eyes, now burning with a renewed ferocity, locked onto the coalition forces. They turned their grotesque forms toward the soldiers below, intent on unleashing a new wave of terror. Zhang Yi's heart sank as he watched the scene unfold from his vantage point. "Damn," he shouted into the communication channel, his voice sharp with urgency. "Flying bronze-armored corpses are coming your way. Stay alert." His warning crackled through the radios, but he knew it might already be too late. The flying corpses, moving with a terrifying speed that belied their hulking forms, descended upon the soldiers like a storm of death. Despite Zhang Yi's warning, the soldiers on the ground barely had time to react. The corpses' aerial attacks were swift and deadly, cutting through the ranks like a scythe through wheat. Screams of pain and fear filled the air as the soldiers tried desperately to defend themselves, but the flying corpses were relentless. Even as Zhang Yi surveyed the chaos below, his sharp eyes caught sight of a distant, more ominous threat, a horde of zombies advancing with terrifying inevitability. Hundreds of thousands strong, the horde stretched to the horizon, a sea of death that threatened to engulf everything in its path. "This is getting out of hand," Zhang Yi muttered, his voice low but laced with growing desperation. The situation was spiraling beyond his control, and he knew it. His thoughts turned to Bian Zhengwu, who was leading the critical beheading operation against the enemy's commanders. "Bian Zhengwu, we're counting on you now," he said, his voice tinged with a mixture of hope and fear. The first wave of zombies had nearly shattered their defenses, and now the coalition faced both aerial and ground threats. Zhang Yi knew that without the success of Bian Zhengwu's operation, their chances of survival were slim. The thought of retreat began to gnaw at him, a bitter pill he was reluctant to swallow but might have no choice but to consider. If Bian Zhengwu failed, he would have to retreat with his closest allies, leaving the others to face a grim fate. He quickly relayed orders through the team's communication system: "Fall back to our positions, and be ready to retreat with me at a moment's notice." His voice was steady, but the weight of his words was undeniable. The soldiers understood the gravity of the situation. If Zhang Yi was calling for a retreat, it meant the battle was all but lost. Zhang Yi's mind raced as he considered their options. If it were only a few of them, he believed they could escape using the dimensional doors, his unique spatial ability that allowed him to cross to other place. But if Bian Zhengwu and his team failed, the rest would face certain death. The thought of leaving so many behind was unbearable, but Zhang Yi was a realist. Survival was paramount, and he could not save everyone. His thoughts drifted to Zhou Keir, who was at the church, far from the front lines but not safe from the chaos. His heart pounded with urgency, a deep, primal need to protect her rising within him. Turning his gaze towards the church, his blood ran cold as he spotted two bronze-armored flying corpses diving towards it. Their intent was clear, and Zhang Yi's fear spiked. "Damn it," he cursed, his voice thick with dread. Although the church was surrounded by defenses, no one expected an aerial assault. The sight of the creatures breaching the church's defenses filled him with a cold, sinking horror. Within seconds, the monsters tore through the building's walls, their claws and fangs ripping into the unsuspecting victims inside. The sounds of slaughter echoed in Zhang Yi's ears, driving him to action. Zhou Keir's life was in peril. Zhang Yi wasted no time, activating his dimensional doors with a thought. The world around him blurred as he moved, his only focus on reaching her in time. As he closed in on the church, the screams of the dying grew louder, a grim chorus that spurred him to greater speed. But just as he was about to step through the final portal, a brilliant white light erupted from within the church, momentarily blinding him. The light was intense, almost divine in its brilliance. It enveloped the entire church, and Zhang Yi could only watch in stunned disbelief as the bronze-armored flying corpses were expelled from the building like bullets. Their once fearsome forms were now shattered upon hitting the ground. Zhang Yi's mind raced with questions. Is there a mutant inside? He wondered, his thoughts swirling with the implications. Breathing a sigh of relief, Zhang Yi assessed the situation. The Snow Worship Sect, the religious group to which Zhou Qi belonged, would never leave their leader, Yuan Kongya, unguarded. The two shattered corpses lay in pieces on the ground, their shattered remains still emanating an aura of malevolence. Despite their defeat, the eyes of the creatures seemed to burn with a defiant, almost sentient rage as they roared silently at the church. Guards from the Snow Worship Sect, clad in ceremonial armor, sprang into action, attacking the fallen creatures with ruthless efficiency. But Zhang Yi had no intention of joining the fray. His mission was clear: find Zhou Qi and ensure her safety. He swiftly stepped through the dimensional doors, emerging inside the chaotic scene of the church. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with fear. Believers huddled together, their faces pale and their bodies trembling as they sought refuge from the horrors outside. In the center of the church, bathed in the divine light streaming through the shattered ceiling, stood Yuan Kongya. Her calm, serene presence was in stark contrast to the chaos around her. Zhang Yi could feel the power radiating from her, a sacred aura that marked her as someone of great importance. Could she be too powerful in the Snow Worship Sect? The thought surprised him, but as he watched her, it seemed entirely plausible. His eyes quickly scanned the room, searching for Zhou Qi. He found her hiding behind the pillar, clutching a medicine box, her hands trembling with fear. Relief washed over him at the sight of her, and without hesitation, he crossed the room in a few swift strides, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "It's okay. I'm here now," he whispered, his voice gentle but firm. Zhou Qi's tension melted away as she buried her face in his chest, her fear giving way to a sense of security now that Zhang Yi was with her. Yuan Kongya watched the scene with quiet curiosity, processing Zhang Yi's sudden appearance. She had seen many things in her time, but Zhang Yi's use of spatial abilities was rare, even among those with great power. She regarded him with newfound respect, recognizing that he was no ordinary warrior. The sounds of battle outside the church grew louder, the doors shaking as desperate believers pounded on them, seeking refuge from the carnage. Zhou Qi looked up at Zhang Yi, her eyes filled with worry. "Zhang Yi, are we running out of time?" she asked, her voice trembling. Zhang Yi maintained a serious demeanor, his mind racing as he calculated their next move. "Stay with me. We'll make it," he replied, his tone leaving no room for doubt. He knew that time was running out, and they needed to act quickly. Deciding there was no time for discretion, Zhang Yi activated the dimensional doors once more, whisking Zhou Qi away from the church and into relative safety. He could not afford to worry about others now. The situation was too dire, and saving everyone was beyond his power. All that mattered was ensuring that Zhou Qi survived. As they disappeared into the swirling vortex of the dimensional door, Zhang Yi steeled himself for the battles yet to come, knowing that their struggle was far from over.